Hey everybody, what's up? I'm Joefrey, and this is a new episode of the NetTuts.com Screencast of the Week. So today what we're going to be doing is taking a ThemeForce.net PSD theme, and we're going to convert it to HTML and CSS. So I'm going to try to do one of these style tutorials once a month or so, because they seem to be so popular. So the one I chose this week is from Joefrey, and it's called Paper Business. So let's just take a quick look at what that will bring us. And we have kind of a nice Web 2.0 style theme, you know. So before we begin, be sure to take a look at Joefrey's thing, and be sure to look at the rest of his profile. He's a fantastic designer, and he's done very well on ThemeForce.net, so be sure to check that out. Okay, so moving over into Photoshop, if you purchase his theme, this is what you're going to be able to download. Now, what we are going to do is take this and convert it into HTML. Now, luckily, on the PSD side, there's not too much to take out. If we just take a quick look here, we will want to grab this paper background. Now, I thought for a while about the best way to do it. Now, one problem is if we just cut this out as it is, you limit yourself somewhat as far as the height, because then it won't expand. If you go over that, it'll just overflow. So that's one bad problem. Now, usually what people do is you end up having to add a bit extra markup, where you take maybe the top section and position that at the very top, and then you have another extra div, and you have a background that you position at the bottom, and then the middle, the same thing. I'm not going to do that since it's just too much, and in this situation, I don't know if we need it ever to expand. So what I decided to do is we're just going to crop this out right here. And sometimes what I even do, rather than using the slice tool, if you only need to get rid of a few items, is just select it, crop it down, and save it for the web. And that's kind of what I did for this one. So I grabbed that one, and then I did the same thing down here. Now, what I ended up doing, let me just go ahead and grab that. You'll see here with the page fold, you have the background. Now, we could just keep the blue as it is in the background, but what if the purchaser decides to change this body background? It's going to look very odd. So the best bet is to save this as a 24-bit ping, and then we'll compensate for IE6 with just a simple JavaScript file. Now, the other things you need to grab are just grab a little snippet of the background. It can be 10 pixels by 10 pixels, something like that. Just crop it down, save it. You also need to grab this little airplane that actually, this is an old vector that Collis has been selling. So just crop that down. You need to make sure, once again, that should be a 24-bit ping. Okay, so make sure you remove the background before you save it. And then, other than that, there's not too much to grab. You should grab this rockable right here. So grab that. And we need to grab this little play button right here, like so. Okay, so you're welcome to just crop it down and do it one by one, or you're welcome to use the slice tool, so whatever you're most comfortable with. I do both. Now, these buttons here, we're not going to be using images, because obviously we need this prev and next to be anchor tags, and the same thing for view portfolio. So we'll be creating those buttons on our own. And then the final thing I had to grab, it's not even absolutely necessary, but I wanted to grab this logo. Even though we could probably mimic it using one of the system fonts, I went ahead and grabbed that. And once again, 24-bit ping. It doesn't matter. We can handle IE6 very easily, so don't worry about those transparency problems. So then you want to grab that, and really, that's all we need to do. So you're looking at about maybe about 5 images. So let's go to what I ended up with. I can find it. Let me go ahead and, sorry, my desktop gets all screwed up anytime I change the resolution, because I have to convert down to about 1,000 pixels for these screencasts. So this is what I ended up with. Okay, so we have our airplane, we have the background, we have a button gradient. So let's go back and look at that one real quick, because I did forget to go over that with you. If you look here, Joefrey, or if it's Joffrey, I apologize. My name was almost spelled that way, so I'm thinking it's Joefrey. But anyways, if you look here, if we check the eyedropper tool, And we just kind of go around here. You can see he has a very subtle gradient, just going from an off-white to a solid white. So what I did is I just grabbed this whole section right here, cropped it down, and saved it for the web. Okay, so we just have a very thin gradient. What else? We have the featured background, and that is this section right here that this Rockable logo is on. We have the footer background. We have the logo that says Paper Business, a play button. These buttons I originally got just for the example, but we can get rid of those. And then finally, the Rockable logo. So, pretty simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy those and place it into my new solution, since we're going to be working the HTML from scratch. And I'll just paste that in. Okay, so let's go into, I'm using Notepad++, and this is our basic index.html page. So let's get started. The first thing that we need to pay attention to is Joefrey is using a 800 pixel wide website. So if you were to actually just measure, you grab the ruler tool and you just measure from one end to the other, you'll see he chose 800 pixels. Okay, and you come up right there, 798. I was probably off by a little bit. So we need to make sure that we have a container div and we set the width to 800 pixels and the margins to auto, since this is a centered website. So let's get started. Div ID equals container. And always remember, we don't need to view this in the browser for actually quite a while. So if you find yourself doing it, you know, you're kind of working out of order. You need to work on the markup right now, nothing else. Okay, within it, let's start with the header. The header is going to encompass the logo and this navigation. Okay, so let's come back. Div ID equals header. And the first thing we need to add is our logo. So the source it's stored within the images folder, and the name of the image is logo.png. And we'll give it an alt text of Paper Business, because that is the name of Joefrey's theme. Okay, the next step is to create the navigation. So I'm going to do a UL. Now, truthfully, I don't need to give this an ID at all. So be sure, that's one thing a lot of newer people do, is they just add IDs to everything, and you don't need to. If in your CSS file you're accessing it with, let's say you gave this an ID of nav, you could access it with nav, or you could remove the ID completely and just do header UL, because we know there will only be one unordered list on the page. However, there is something to be said for, in my CSS file, by seeing nav, I immediately know what that's referring to. And if I come back to this project a year later and I see header UL, I won't immediately know that it's referring to the navigation. So find the medium between using too many IDs and not enough at all. Okay, UL. So what now? We are going to be adding this home, about, services, portfolio, blog, and contact. So each one will be, list item and an anchor tag that goes nowhere, because we won't be finishing this website. It would take far too long. And we'll do home. Okay. Do the copy and paste method. Remember, copy and paste as much as you possibly can. What's next? About, services, services, portfolio, blog, and contact. Okay, that takes care of our unordered list and our header section. So I'm going to hit enter twice, and now we are going to start with that featured section, and that's going to be right here. So let's take a quick look. We want to have a wrapping div, of course, and we will set this kind of paper background. If I zoom in, you might be able to see it. This kind of nice paper background as the background to our div. And then we're going to have an image with it and a heading tag and some paragraphs. And then these buttons we'll have to create as well. So div ID equals feature is what we'll call it. And featured. I'm a big fan of commenting your markup as much as possible. And next we will add in that Rockable logo. So image source equals images / Rockable logo.png. The alt will be rockable. And I'm going to give this a class as well. And we'll give that featured image. Now, the reason I'm giving it a class rather than an ID is because depending on some people might use some JavaScript to turn that into kind of a scrolling featured section where you hit next and then it fades in the next featured item. And some JavaScript files use where they literally just you would copy this 5 different times and paste it in, each within their own div, and then the JavaScript file would hide all the divs but the current one. So considering that, I decided to use class instead of ID. Okay, so it doesn't hurt, but it could help you. Okay, moving along, let's take care of this section right here. So we want a heading 2 tag is what I'm going to use, and then some paragraph, and then this extra interface design CSS HTML. So we will do h2, and that just says rockable.com. And then we have some paragraph information, so I will just copy that out, like so. Come back, paste it in. And let me clean this up just real quickly. Okay, now what's next? Next we need to grab this interface design, and you can see that's a different color. So we will need to add some kind of ID so that we can latch onto it. So let's do p class, or I'm sorry, not a class, an ID, we'll just say details. And paste that in. And you know what? We can put this onto its own line to save a little bit of space. Okay, what's next? Next we have these buttons. Now, because we want these to be clickable, I'm going to place them within their own divs. So let's do div, and let's give it a class of buttons, because we might be using this style of button elsewhere as well. So close that out. And buttons. Or I could call it button, which would probably be better, but it doesn't matter. And first let's add some anchor tags. So do href goes nowhere, but this one will say prev. And then we have a divider. And then next. Close that out. And then coming back, you see we have a 1 through 4. Now truthfully, that should be anchor tags as well, because I'm assuming you could click between those, but I'm not sure how he intended to set that up. So considering that, I'm just going to place it in its own span tag, and then you could do whatever you want with it. And we will do that with span 1 slide 4 and close span. Okay, that looks pretty good for our first button, and then we will use CSS to turn that into a pretty looking button. And I'm just going to copy all of that because we're going to do another one. Okay, but this next one is going to be, let's go back to view portfolio. So that will be an anchor tag as well, and it'll be view portfolio. And then, if you remember, I said we needed to grab this little play button image and save it. So let's add that in right now. Image source equals images/play button is how I saved it, .png, and alt will be view portfolio. Okay, and actually, let's close out the anchor tag there, or after the image. We'll see how it works and then come back to it. Okay, so that takes care of our featured section. Remember, we've yet to go into the browser and look at it. So the next section we need to work on, if I'm going to zoom out a little bit, is this main section. So I'm going to wrap everything here within a div with an ID of main. Okay, so that will take care of all of that section. So div ID equals main. And the first thing that we'll add is the slogan. So you can see here, we build websites based on the latest web standards, providing the best possible solution to your company. So let's just grab that real quick and paste it in. But first, let's put it in its own div. That way we can style it and move it around how we see fit. So slogan. But yeah, it's possible we can get away without this div. It's there. and clean that up. Now, if we go back, a few things he had in blue. He had websites and web standards in blue. So the way I'll target that is just using a simple span tag. Wait, web standards providing the best solutions to your company. Web standards, okay? Span. And add a period. Okay, this would be a good place to add this paper airplane. So what I'm going to do is my initial desire was to add it as a background, maybe to the slogan div or the main div. But then you get into an issue where, as many of you know, sometimes it's common to add overflow hidden to a div in order to make sure it clears its floats. However, when you do that, it will hide anything that overlaps, including this airplane. So if I had used it as a background image, half of this airplane would be cut off, and that kind of ruins the idea. So considering that, I just went ahead and added it as an image. So we'll place it right at the top. Image source equals images slash, I think I called it airplane. Yes, airplane.png. Alt will just be airplane, that's fine. And I'm also going to give this an ID. We'll make it main graphic, just in case the purchaser decides to change it from an airplane to something else. If we give it an ID of airplane, suddenly it's not going to correspond to the new image at all. So give it somewhat of a generic name. Okay, so we're moving pretty quickly. We've taken care of our slogan. Now we should look at who we are, what we do, and latest blog. Now, if you're newer, you might think, as far as naming conventions, you might think you could give it as a div with an ID of who we are, and a div with an ID of what we do, and latest blog. Well, that's not a good idea, because what if down the road you change who we are to, what we offer? Then suddenly you have this what we offer div, or we have CSS files saying who we are corresponding to something that isn't even on the page anymore. And then you might move up and think, okay, well, I'll give it an ID of left, center, and right. You could do that too, but what I decided to do is we'll use call 1, call 2, and call 3, all right? So after our slogan, let's go ahead and write those in. Div ID equals call 1. Forgot to add the 1. Next, call 2. And finally, call 3. Okay, looking good. So let's come back. The first one is who we are. Let's place those in heading 2 tags. So add that in. Oh, whoops. Who we are. And call 2, I believe, is what we do. And call 3 is latest blog. So let's add that in. Latest blog actually really isn't proper grammar, but I'm not going to change that. And okay, so next let's grab some of this paragraph information. So I'm just going to grab this. I'll leave out learn more because we're going to change that later. Actually, you know what? No, we'll just go ahead and grab it all. So come back and we'll place it within a paragraph tag. Give me just a moment. Okay, and learn more, we need a way to target that as well, because obviously that's going to be some kind of link. So let's place it within an anchor tag. Like so. All right. Now I believe, yeah, the second one is identical to the first. So let's just grab that markup, come down to col 2, paste it in. And let's do a quick bit of indenting. Okay, and col 3 is a little bit different because this is from the latest blog entry. So let's grab the title, and why don't we put that within an H5 tag. So H5, close that out. And then I believe we have a date. Yeah, we have January 1. So let's copy that. And we will put that within, let's do P with a class of date. That way we can target it. Paste that in. 2009. Close out the paragraph tag, and then we just have a little bit of text to grab. So grab all that, copy it, come back, and paste it in. Okay. And I should be sure to turn learn more into an anchor tag as well, or read more in this case. Obtain that. Okay, doing well. Still have not looked at it in the browser. That's good. Okay, so we have that. Now let's add our footer. Come down here. So it looks like we have, once again, all of the pages we're on are available. And then this copyright notice. So let me just copy all of that out. And come down, and after col3, and after main, let's add our footer. So div id equals footer, and footer. And you know what? Since we've already written it, let's just go and grab this unordered list. Paste it in. Do a quick bit of cleanup. And I'm not even going to bother with an ID for this one. Come back. Now I need to grab this copyright information again. Come back to my solution, and after the unordered list, we'll just place it within a p tag. Like so. Now, we should note, it looks like here, he has a paper business, looks like it's a little bit stronger, and it has a different color. So let's go ahead and wrap that within strong tags, and then we'll change the color a little bit darker. And finally, we ended our footer. We also need to, did I not end our container? Maybe I accidentally deleted it. So let's end that div, end container, and we are done with our markup for the home page. So it didn't take very long at all, did it? So let's save this and go ahead and view it in the browser. So I'm going to run it in Firefox. And this is what we end up with. So, looks pretty good. That's pretty much exactly what we want. Before we get started on our CSS, let's make sure that we didn't make any errors in our HTML. So using the Web Developer toolbar, I'm going to go to Tools and come down to Validate Local HTML. Great, this document was successfully checked as HTML, so no problems at all. And by the way, if I did not show you, this is what we will end up with ultimately. Okay? If it looks a little stretched to you, that's actually because on this different computer I'm using, when I changed the resolution, it seems like it kind of stretched everything out, which I haven't experienced on other computers. But you'll be able to see the final product with this article. So I'm going to close that one out, and also close that NetTuts. So if this looks daunting to you as far as getting the CSS started, don't worry, it's not going to be that tough. I'm going to come back, and we need to add a new file for our CSS. So create a new file, save it, and I'm going to save it within a new folder. So let's go ahead and create that, called CSS. Open that up, and we'll save it as default.css. Okay, so let's link to it in our project. Let's give the title project, we'll say Joefrey's theme, the other Joefrey, and let's link to the style sheet. So link rel equals style sheet, href equals css/default.css. All right, so let's take a quick look over our markup, make sure everything looks okay. And now let's come to Firefox, refresh the page, and get started on the CSS portion.